Welcome into episode 426 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue, and of course, Scott McLaughlin. Now, Bridget and Scott, the Bruins got a win over the Carolina Hurricanes 5-1 at TD Garden. And I know that I have been one of the people talking about, I don't want, I know players compete to win, but if the results are that they lose every game the rest of the year, I'd be happy with that. That one game that they won, you would think I'd be sitting here saying, son of a bitch, guys, what are you doing? But I will admit, I do think that it wasn't a bad thing in that situation to get a feel-good moment for one night. I will leave the rest of that to Bridget for her opening shift because the Bruins did lose to the Buffalo Sabres. And Bridget, why don't we just throw it to you for your opening shift, because you're thinking what I'm thinking and what most Bruins fans are thinking, which is what, Bridget?
Well, I came on here and I said, well, I have a positive takeaway, and that is that was a really important game to lose. That game, by losing that game, the Bruins are directly lost and gave points to a team that they were, I don't even know if this is the right terminology, they were fighting for a higher draft pick against, because it's really going the opposite way. More like they're fighting to lose more games than. And so what happened when they lost was they allowed Buffalo to jump up. It's such a huge cluster of teams that have 74 to 71 points. It's 7 different teams. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 different teams. And you're wanting to see those guys take points so that you get a better draft pick. And as of right now, by the Bruins losing that game, they would be picking 4th, which is a big difference than picking. If they had won, they would have been back up to 6 or 7. So we're kind of just watching these other teams throughout the rest of the season. But when you're playing a team that you're directly competing with for a better draft pick, and there was a little bit of, good positives to take away from the beginning of that game. Pastrnak and Geeky continue to look good. That top line continues to, with Elias Lindholm in there now, continues to do some good things. But, and I don't want to take Scott's shifts, so I will keep it to the fact that it helped their draft positioning quite a bit. And it comes on the heels of a big win that I think people were excited about. So you get the one good feel good moment against Carolina, you lose in Buffalo, and you can't really be all that upset about it if you're a Bruins fan, because everybody's just going and checking the standings and refreshing the standings and saying, okay, well, are they picking 4th? Are they picking 5th? Like, where are they picking? And as of right now, they've done a great job, because I don't think they can get higher than 4. So if they can stay at 4, that's good. And then maybe the ping pong balls go where they need to go.
I'll let Brian go next, because my open shift will piggyback off his a little.
Okay. So, yeah, my opening shift has to do with David Pastrnak. And last night he had 3 assists again. And I want to double check. So his 3rd assist last night, Bridget and Scott, was that his 13th consecutive point on a Bruins goal, or his 12th?
I think it was 11. I think it's 11. I think it's
Okay.
11 straight goals he's had
Okay.
a point on.
Okay, so when they flashed that graphic that he had a point on 10 consecutive goals, that must have been for on his 2nd point of the night last night.
Yeah.
But basically, I just want to shout him out, because we've talked about in the past the captaincy vacancy that exists with this team, and David Pastrnak is a strong candidate. Obviously, Charlie McAvoy is a strong candidate. But we've talked about how, because Pastrnak has been in the fight during this tough stretch of hockey, during a trade deadline that saw their captain go and some other leaders and longtime players go, to no fault of Charlie McAvoy's, because he was injured, but that David Pastrnak had to shoulder those questions and face the media, and he has just continuously performed to a level this year on a really bad hockey team. And he has 97 points right now in 78 games. He's got 40 goals, 57 assists, 97 points in 78 games. And we talked about it before the episode started recording, and people mentioned it online to me, but that's accounting for 47% of Boston's goals this year. Pastrnak has a point on 47% of Boston's goals this year. So the fact that there's still 4 games remaining, he's probably going to hit 100 points, right? I mean, most likely, unless they shut him down or something, which I don't think they would or should do. Then to get 100 points on this team, that tells you all you need to know about Pastrnak, I think, as a performer and also as a leader. I think he's growing into that leadership role. And I think that without a doubt, he should be the next captain of the Boston Bruins. I understand there's a case to be made for McAvoy. And I wouldn't be up in arms if McAvoy got the C. But if I were handing out the C, if they even go with a captain next year, maybe they elect to go with 3 assistants and see who pulls away in a full season as the captain. Maybe they do that. But I'm just so impressed with the guy who has a 61 goal season to his name, right? But scoring 61 goals on one of the greatest regular season teams of all time, statistically the greatest, versus 100 points on what is one of the worst Bruins teams in my lifetime, just wildly impressed by him, especially when you consider that he had a really slow start to the season.
Yeah, so my opening shift is related in the sense that it's about the rest of the offense outside of Pastrnak and his line, which has been non-existent. So Sacco moved Elias Lindholm up to the top line with Pastrnak and Geeky, and they scored all 5 goals in the win over Carolina. They scored the first 2 goals against Buffalo. Pastrnak then sets up the third on the power play. Casey Middlestad finishes, tap in right in front. There has been nothing after that. They've tried this combination of Casey Middlestad and Pavel Zacha on the second line, with Zacha going back to the wing. I think there's been 0 chemistry. Bruins have been outshot 19-4 over 2 games with those 2 on the ice. They gave Fabian Lysell a shot at right wing on that line. I quite frankly think he just does not look ready for this level. Doesn't mean he never will be. Means he's not right now. Bad, soft play with one hand on his stick in the defensive zone leading up to 1 goal. Similar play that led to another scoring chance. Misses his assignment on Rasmus Dahlin on another goal. He gets bumped down because they really don't have any other wing options. Vinny Lettieri gets a shot in the second line. Shocker, didn't change the world. Just a lot of guys have gone very quiet offensively, and I know in the here and now, people don't really care because we all agree, like, the more they lose, the higher the draft pick they get, the better off they are in the long run. So it's not a huge issue right now. It becomes a huge issue in the offseason because it shows you just how much work they have to do offensively to fill this team in. Even if you run back the same first line, say you don't get that bona fide number 1 center this offseason, which I don't really think they're going to be able to, you need at least 1 impact top 6 forward on your first or second line, like legit upgrade, not someone who, I guess they can play there. No, like real, actual top line talent type of player. And then you need like 2 or 3 other top 9 forwards. Depending on where you think like a Fraser Minten or Marat Khusnadinov slots in what kind of role they can play next year, or where you think Patra slots in. Like, there's just, outside of Mark Kastelik as a 4th liner, I would say there's like nobody locked into a bottom 6 role right now. Like, you could legitimately change over 4 or 5 spots in your bottom 6, including an entire 3rd line. It's a lot, and it's unfortunately it's a lot of guys who have gone quiet, who are trying to win jobs now and trying to show that they can be part of the future. Who I think during the losing streak and then even this past weekend, I don't really think they're making a great case for themselves.
Well, you brought up a few names there, Scott, and one of them is Marat Khusnadinov, which is obviously, as the leader of Kuzi Gang, I want nothing but the best for him, and I think that he's still young and a promising player, certainly as a potential, middle six, bottom six type forward. There it is. So Bridget showed me, for those not watching on YouTube, she's showing a Marat Khusnadinov. Is that a pregame poster from the Garden?
Correct.
Wow,
Correct. Yes.
just absolutely
But I
incredible.
saw it and I said, "Oh, I need to get this for Brian
Oh my
for
God, just look at him.
him."
Isn't he
So,
amazing? He's just
so I got
amazing.
you this, Brian,
Thank
from
you.
the garden the other day, and you can hang this up in the background for next week's show.
I will. I absolutely will. So a player like Khusnadinov, to Scott's point, he's gone quiet, and this time is a tryout for a lot of guys on this team right now. And what I while production and scoring opportunities haven't been generated or capitalized on much by Khusnadinov, I do like his compete. I do like his motor, his effort and energy. And you can't you can't overlook that because not every player has that constant motor where they're going to give you all that they have. And he also, there was like a mic'd up segment against the Hurricane game, in the Hurricane game, where Fraser Minten was mic'd up, but he was sitting next to Khusnadinov on the bench, and they were both just very like uh, into the game, vocal on the bench. Those little things are nice to see. To Scott's point, that's not going to win you a spot in and of itself, but it's good to see. But he definitely has work to do as far as earning a long term spot on the team. Fraser Minten is another name that Scott brought up, and he's also a young player. When we talk about Fabian Lysell not really showing he's ready for the NHL level, in Scott's opinion, Fraser Minten is a guy that I watched in his first two games in Boston, and especially against Carolina, where it's a heavy team, it's a good team, right? Obviously, Carolina probably had a scheduled loss, right? They're bound for the playoffs. It was a back to back. They were out a couple of players, but somebody asked me online what I thought of Minten's game against Carolina, and the best way I could describe it was that while he didn't really flash offensively, and that's you know it's his still his first like 20 games I think in the league, but he looked like somebody who respects the game and respects the details of the game, especially as a center iceman, which you need to have that level of detail and respect for the game. He doesn't cheat on plays. He makes himself available for outlets. He competes hard. So I liked those little habits in Mitten's game, those same habits that Scott probably isn't seeing and others probably aren't seeing in Lysell's game. So is Minten a solve in a top six role? No, not in my opinion, not based off what I've seen. But I think the point is there's a lot of players, whether it's Patra, Minten, and others, Khusnadinov, where they have an opportunity to make this team next year. Certainly in a third line role, and there's nothing wrong with that. Being a third liner in the National Hockey League, you're a damn good player in that role. So yes, the roster needs help up top. And you guys talked about something on Sunday's skate that I want to get to in a little bit, but I'll just let you guys respond to any of that.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about Fraser Minten on Sunday Skate, one thing that Razor said that I agree with is like he just looks like an NHLer. Like he just looks, physically mature enough to handle the NHL. He just seems to carry himself like a pro. Um, doesn't look like someone who's overwhelmed by the moment or overmatched by NHL players. Yeah, obviously there's more to see. He's still just 20 years old. I think he's now played 21 career NHL games. Like, yeah, of course, there's a lot of development. So my on the list of issues that of guys I highlighted, like he's very low in terms of concern level because he's just starting. Like we're talking about 2 games with Boston. So I'm not yeah, at some point you're gonna want to see production from him. I will say, like, if you go back to his games with Toronto in the NHL this season, he has now gone 12 NHL games, 12 straight games this season without a point. So there's going to have to be some production. Like the expectation for Minten, and maybe there's that ceiling even above this, but like the floor for him, you hope, is third line center. Like everyone's compared him to Charlie Coyle. And it's like, yeah, if he can be a third line center, a good third line center, like you're happy. And then anything above that is gravy. But to be a good third line center in the NHL, you do have to score. You do have to produce offense. And there's time for that to come, so I'm not panicking. But it's not there yet. And his production, like even in the AHL, has generally been pretty low. Now he had a hat trick in Providence, so that's great to see. And hopefully, he'll go down for the AHL playoffs and score. And same thing for Lysell and Patra and Merkulov, if you still feel like he has a shot moving forward. Like, yeah, hopefully those guys are gonna score and finish the season on a strong note. And then like one or two or three of them carry it into next season and make a real push for a spot on this team. I just think like you can't lock any of those guys into a third line job right now.
No, and he's big, right? Like one of the first things I noticed when we saw him in person on the ice, we're watching him from the ninth floor, obviously. It's quite a long distance away, but you recognize how big he looked out there and how like he skated like he was confident. You just noticed the body language. And he's 6'2", which on this team is small because of Nikita Zadorov. but no, he's a big player, and he's not just lanky. He seems to have some strength to him as well. So that's definitely a positive. He was talking to the media before his first game with the Bruins about how he understands the importance of the defensive side of the game as a center and the responsibilities of a center at the NHL level. He is clearly trusted for his defensive side of the game already, because 2 of his 12 minutes in yesterday's game were on the penalty kill. So he's seeing time on the PK, which, you would never see them bring up Fabian Lysell and throw him right on the PK. This is a guy that maybe there's a role for him as a third line center next season if he's able to make it out of camp, which as of right now, I don't see anything stopping him from doing that. That he could play a role of someone like Charlie Coyle, like you mentioned. They lose Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederick's penalty killing. They lose Brad Marchand's penalty killing. They have to find a way to have the next person fill that role, because that's something that Coyle and Frederick did. So that's at least positive, and you feel like he's developed enough to the point where he's probably ready to break into the NHL full time next year. He hasn't had that happen yet. He made Toronto out of camp, and then I believe got sent back down to I don't even what was his junior team? Kamloops.
Was that last year?
That was last year. So he made it out of
Yeah.
camp last year, and didn't he make it out of camp again this year, and then went to the AHL for most of the rest of the season before he got traded?
That sounds right.
Yeah, so he's been a guy that's made teams out of camp. And the first year he was just still, I think, 18 years old, and then they decided
that was like the Patra situation where he couldn't go to the AHL, so he got that kind of extra tryout for a few games to start the season. Obviously the Bruins kept Patra. Toronto sent Minten back to the WHL that year.
Yeah. And there's a lot of positives to say about his demeanor as well. So I've heard nothing but good things about his personality and the way that he approaches, the game professionally. And so, yeah, there's certainly positives there. I know, Brian, you had another thought on Minten, right?
Yes, that popped up when you guys were just talking, but yeah, like I said, I thought that his attention to detail and his awareness on the ice of where he was in the ice and who was a dangerous threat to score on the opposition in the D zone for Boston. He was recognizing guys open in the slot for Carolina, picking up their sticks. He was giving, on regroups, he was giving his D the proper outlets, whether it was a neutral zone regroup or a D zone regroup. So little things like that. I thought he was strong on board battles. So again, there's more offense that I'm sure he's going to try to find at the NHL level, obviously. But the details of the game sometimes are, very difficult for players to grasp. And at only 20 years old, to recognize, I saw a very mature game out of a 20-year-old. I'll just put it that way. So I think that's very good for Boston going forward. And I just think that if Boston's going to try to get back to competing next year, they're probably gonna try to spend towards the top of the roster rather than the third line. I think they might try to rely on their current system, relatively speaking, to maybe fill a third line for them. Obviously, fourth liners you can probably get on the cheap out in the market, but again, I just think that they're gonna look at a kid like Patra, a kid like Minten, maybe a Khusnadinov, some others internally to maybe try to fill out the third line as opposed to buying a third line, because I think they're going to try to buy elsewhere. And that kind of leads me to the point I was going to bring up to you guys, which is on Sunday Skate, you were talking about the line of Lindholm, Pastrnak, and Geeky. And I think it was Bridget who mentioned that it really is the combination of Geeky and Pastrnak that has that chemistry right now. And whether it's Zacha with them or Lindholm, I think now, obviously, the third guy in that line is a part of it. He's doing his job. But it makes me wonder if they are going to try to resurrect Lindholm in the second year of his contract, they might try to keep him with Pastrnak. And I think the key to Lindholm being successful with Pastrnak is potentially having Morgan Geeky there. So this whole conversation about should they sell high on Geeky, what is Geeky on a third line without Pastrnak? What is Geeky on a third line if he's not on the first line with Pastrnak? These are all questions that, you know what? If they just keep him with Pastrnak, you won't have to figure that out because you know that they work well together. And if signing Geeky, you're keeping that chemistry with him and Pastrnak, and that helps kind of justify a Lindholm resurrection. And I can see them re-signing Geeky for more than one reason and for more than one player. And Scott, I know on Sunday Skate, you and Razor mentioned that they're not going to go into next year with any set lines for 82 games. But just, I wanted you guys' opinion on the combination of Geeky and Pastrnak. And I understand people wanting to sell high on an asset, but at the same time, you do need production and you do need, I mean, he's approaching 30 goals and he's got over 50 points. And now I can see people saying he won't do that again. Well, if he's playing with Pastrnak, why not? Why can't he?
Yeah. Again, like you can't fill all of this team's holes in one off season. Like it's just too complicated and it's going to be too expensive. So yeah, obviously in a perfect world, you have two really talented line mates at center and left wing with Pastrnak who aren't on this team right now, who are more talented than anything else you have. Okay, tell me how you're getting those two players this summer. Going to be extremely difficult. Quite frankly, I don't think you're doing it. So you look for, okay, what else works? What can we piece together that can at least be good enough? And the fact is you've had a good first line now since December. And it's been with Pastrnak and Geeky together, and then usually Zacha between them, but now Elias Lindholm. Like, is it one of the very best elite lines in the NHL? No. But is it a good representative first line? Yeah, it has been. And like the statistics back it up. Like they're getting tough matchups. They're outscoring the opposition when they're on the ice. They're producing. They just had a monster weekend with Lindholm there, including, I know it was an off game for them, but all 5 of the goals that they scored on Saturday were with Jacob Slavin and Brent Burns on the ice. That's one of the best D pairs in the NHL. And like, even if those guys started having an off night, you think once they saw -3 next to their game, there wasn't like a little pride of like, we can't let this happen. Like, I don't think those guys were just accepting getting scored on over and over again, and yet that line kept scoring on them. So, like, okay, so you can do that, and you you have to figure out the second line, right? Like, so obviously, if Lindholm fits in that first line, you can move Zaka to the wing because this team really desperately needs some wings. So you would think, like, okay, maybe Zaka can be part of that if he doesn't have to center Pasternak's line, which is why you want to see more time with him and Middlestat together, because you look at that and it's like that could be 2/3 of your second line next year. They certainly have not clicked right off the bat. It's been a rough first 2 games for that combination.
I think
But
they're
you've got 4 more games here, so
Middlestat was -2 last game and -2 against Carolina. Like, that line's been on the ice for more goals against, and they have 4. And I think it's funny because remember in the beginning of the season, and we've brought this up a few times, but we thought that Zaka, Lindholm, Pastrnak was going to be such a great line. And who would have thought that it was actually better if it was Geeky on that line? Like, Geeky, Lindholm, Pastrnak was the combination that maybe was missing. And it's looked good. It really has. And I was noticing it again yesterday against Buffalo that I had made the point, like you mentioned on Sunday Skate, that it's kind of Pastrnak and Geeky, and then Lindholm just the beneficiary of some of it. But if you pay close attention to play outside the offensive zone, Lindholm really he's a guy who carries them in a different way. Like, defensively, he's going to be the one that gets back, and so he plays an important role in that line as well in terms of allowing Pastrnak to kind of play freely offensively. And so there's a good complement of having those 3 guys together. And if it means that Lindholm now finds himself in better spots in the offensive zone, um, or or he's been going to those spots all year, but no one could find him with a pass the way that David Pastrnak can. That all works out, and I think that if that's your first line next year, uh, you're okay with that as long as Lindholm can kind of keep doing what he's been doing the last few games with those 2. In terms of the second line, that's where you really have to do your work, because Zaka and Middlestat, I don't know what you do if that doesn't click, which it hasn't really yet. And then they have Lysell on the right side. I think you made this kind of jokingly, Scott, saying, "Oh, just add Mitch Marner over there on your second line on the right side and see what happens." And I mean, that would be the biggest move that they could do in the offseason. That would be, they need to fill in on that second line, or a guy that can bounce between the first or second line, depending on what you wanted to do with them. So yeah, there's a big piece missing. And if you want somebody like Mitch Marner, you're probably going to have to pay an extreme amount of what's left of your cap, because it seems like a lot of teams are going to be in the market for him, and that's going to drive the price way up. But you are definitely in need of a top 6 winger or 2.
Yeah. And someone's going to pay Sam Bennett a boatload of money. He's only 28 years old. It's possible that come free agency, he's a 2-time Stanley Cup winner. If not, at least a 1-time winner. And obviously he's a center iceman. Could the Bruins, there's going to be a lot of Bruins fans that would say, don't repeat a Elias Lindholm situation and give top dollar to a non-number 1 center. But the Bruins, it depends how creative they get or how desperate they get. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, is Casey Middlestat even on this roster next year? You would think so, but maybe the Bruins see their top 6 as being too light, and they try to get Bennett and then a cheaper but yet still effective winger outside of Marner. Like, there's a lot of ways that this offseason can go. That I have no way of predicting it. I truly don't. One stat I want to give on Pastrnak kind of goes along with my opening shift, but also the conversation. Somebody just tweeted at me that this year is the third consecutive season where there is a 40-plus point gap between David Pastrnak and the Bruins' second leading scorer. And I know it's easy to sit here right now and say, well, this team's no good, so that could be obvious. Well, 3 seasons ago was the greatest regular season, team of all time statistically, and he still had that lead. So again,
By
that's
the way,
that's
Morgan Geekie just passed Brad Marchand for a second on the team in scoring.
there you go. So it's that's a tough stat for any of the. I don't think there's a lot of them out there, but that's a tough stat for the trade Pastrnak brigade, because he is a very, very special offensive player. Like obviously there's only one Connor McDavid, right? Leon Draisaitl's a different beast, but what Pastrnak has done in Boston consistently, leading their team in offense, whether it's the greatest regular season team of all time statistically or one of the worst Bruins teams in the last 50 years statistically, he just continues to produce. And that's why my opening shift was it's so impressive he does it no matter what the team around him is. So, yeah, like Scott, when you say it's a good representative first line going forward, yeah, I mean, Pastrnak and Geekie both got off to slow starts this season. So like they have that much more chemistry starting next year. They got off to good starts. Yeah, maybe they just have a great year together, and maybe Scott's a big find duos. That's a duo that appears to be a duo. What are the other ones? TBD.
And if you're worried that like they're not going to sign Morgan Geekie in the offseason, I think they have already made the decision that he's part of the future here for the next few years. Otherwise, he would have gotten moved already at the trade deadline because you have to assume they could have gotten pretty decent value for him at that point with the way he was playing. And maybe they didn't have a trade out there that they liked, or maybe they had decided that he was going to stay and that he was going to be the guy to play with Pastrnak next year. So from what I can tell, he's going to get re-signed. He's a restricted free agent. He'll get a new contract. It will be somewhat team friendly because of the fact that he's restricted and isn't going to go to the open market unless somebody offer sheets him, which Razor jokingly said to me, he's like, nope, nobody's going to offer sheet Morgan Geekie. So it seems like the Bruins have a clear path to re-signing him, and he should be here next year. And then that doesn't create another hole that you need to fill. And it's been working. I mean, Morgan Geekie has been fun to watch. And he's got a great shot too. So you got two wingers on that line that can shoot from distance, and they also can go to the net, and they're great passers. There's a lot that you like about that combination. So I think that you're going to keep it together.
Yeah, he's going to be back. It's just a matter of whether it's a relatively easy negotiation on a multi-year extension, or if it turns into a little bit of a hardball situation and you have to at least threaten arbitration and it kind of drags on into the summer. But he's under team control, so like I'd be shocked if he's gone. On Brian, it's an interesting point about like, do they potentially flip Middlestad? Because we know why they were interested in bringing him in, because he plays a different style than anything else they have at center, where he is more of I'm not going to call him a one-way player, but he's definitely more of an offensive-minded player than the, kind of true two-way defensively responsible centers that we're used to seeing. And
his power play he has value on the power play.
Yeah, he does. And, some of this is going to have to be like, I mean, probably the first thing they're going to figure out this offseason, unless they're targeting someone whose team is still playing in the playoffs, is figuring out the coaching staff and their head coach. And so whether Casey Middlestad's a fit here going forward may very well depend on that. You may get a coach who says, oh yeah, I like having a, creative playmaking center like that. I see a way I can use them. Or you hire a head coach who says, nah, my centers have to play two-way, and I don't see the defense from Casey Middlestad. So, Don, if you can find a deal, like, go ahead. And then that would open the door to do they go get Sam Bennett? Because as it stands right now, I don't really see why this team would spend big on Sam Bennett. I know everyone likes his attitude and he's such a pest and he's been your enemy in the playoffs and he's a player you'd love if he was here. I get all that, but like ultimately he's a 2 or 3 center and you already have a bunch of guys that kind of slot in there. So I don't know if that makes the most sense unless Middlestad's getting moved out. And then you're targeting Sam Bennett as your number 2 center. Which, again, I would also just caution, you still need the play-driving winger on that line that you don't have right now. Because Sam Bennett just got his first 50-point season. He does look at the line mates he plays with in Florida. Like right now, he has Brad Marchand on his line. Normally, he always has Matthew Tkachuk on his line. Obviously, he's out injured right now. Like Sam Bennett's not the one driving play on that line, so just don't make that mistake of thinking we go get him as our 2C and he's the best player on the second line. Like I think you're asking for a disappointing second line if that's
what he does do though, Scott, and also Sam Bennett is younger than I thought he was. He's only 28. There's something about maybe it's that big ass beard he has, or just that the fact that he kind of like just looks like he's just like an older player. But he's only 28 years old. But one thing that he does do, Scott, is because of the way he plays the game, he creates space from oppositions. He creates respect out there. They don't want to. They're wary to attack him, and because they know that he's a very physical player, and they're certainly wary when he's on the forecheck. So players know when he's out there, and that can kind of create space for line mates, which is not something you see on a stat sheet or players info card. It's one of those intangible things. But yes, as the roster currently sits, there's too much redundancy with guys that could be 2 or 3 Cs. That's why, if you were to bring Bennett in with these guys still in the roster, now you're moving too many guys to the wing. And I think they would have to create, openings like we're talking about with potentially moving Middlestad. So, yeah, I'm not closing any doors on what this offseason could look like. I also just want to quickly shout out the person who gave me that 40-point stat on Twitter, Alex. His name is Random Task 68. So thank you for mentioning that Pastrnak has a 40-plus point gap lead the last 3 seasons on the Bruins' next leading scorer.
I have another thought on Casey Middlestat real quick.
Yeah, please.
Or / that whole second line dynamic. So you're talking about Sam Bennett having his first 50-point season. Casey Middlestat only has one. It was a 59-point season. It was a few years ago.
I thought he said 2.
No, I think it's 47, and he had a 47-point season, which is close. But he had
59 and then 57.
Oh yeah, because you have to. Okay, I hadn't added it together because he got traded partway through that year. So okay, he has got 2. You don't necessarily even like. I want to just bring up that Pavel Zacha could also slide over to centering that line if you wanted to move him out and you wanted to put wings around him. That maybe there was a different dynamic with, because Zacha can play either, and maybe because they have at this point a lot of centers that they have for options, including Minten. It seems like it wouldn't be necessary for Zacha to play center, but if you did really want to rearrange things, he could always go back to that role, either on the first line or the second line, depending on where he fit best and what the chemistry was with whoever is on that new line with him next year.
Yeah, and by the way, I know like when we bring up Marner, I mostly bring it up in like a joking way because one, we're so far out from July 1 right now that who maybe Toronto changes, maybe he and Toronto change course like last minute and he ends up staying, and we know the money's going to be crazy, but I just want to make it clear, like, I am absolutely not closing the door on that. Like, I am in on the Bruins making a real run at Mitch Marner because I think that's what this team needs. Like, above anything else is another elite offensive player. You just look at the best teams around the league. Most of them have more than one elite offensive player. You have one right now in David Pastrnak. So I know it would be a weird way to build an offense where now your two best players are both right wings, but they're right wings capable of driving a line. We talked about how Pastrnak can lift up Geeky, Zaka, and Lindholm and make it a really solid first line. Well, Mitch Marner can also do that with a first line, never mind a second line. So I think if you have your top two lines being driven by Pastrnak and Marner, yeah, it would be unique, but I don't think that'd be a bad thing. Like, I think you could have a really good offense built around those two as play driving wingers.
Yeah, you don't think there'd be any issues with situational playing time battling between him and Pastrnak as both right wingers, do you?
I don't think so.
What about on the power play?
I mean, they can play different spots on the power. Like, you can have Pastrnak go back to the one-time spot on the left elbow, and Marner as a playmaker on the right elbow. Like, you can. I think you can figure that stuff out, and then, yeah, I mean, like, offensive situations, end of game. You're probably trying to find a way to get both of them out there. So, I don't know. If someone's playing their offside late in a game on an offensive zone faceoff, like, I think you can make it work, I guess, is what I would say.
All right, so let's circle back to the impact that these final games have on this team and this season, because I just want to make a few things clear. There's a lot of Bruins fans out there, probably most, I'm one of them, right, that would prefer that the results in these last few games are that they lose. And the reason for that, and again, to clarify, that's not me saying I expect the players to go out there and try to lose. Okay, if you're on the ice, you're trying to win. That's not what myself and other Bruins fans are suggesting. It's got nothing to, no one's wanting them to
But
lose
Brian,
on
before
purpose.
you go any further, if you're one of the people tweeting at me over the weekend, like, because I tweet out that the Bruins took a 1-0 lead or something, stop tweeting at me playing themselves out of a top 5 pick. Like, what do you want these guys to do? So, like,
Right.
just not try.
Right.
Anyway, like,
Yeah.
it's driving. I almost want to block people who are responding with that. I'm not going to,
God,
but like,
don't block Brian like that, okay?
Yeah. I was gonna say the same thing. I was gonna say don't block Bridget. But
like fans getting mad at players for scoring goals and trying to win. It's like, guys, players don't try to lose. Never in any sport. Like that, it's just
Right.
insane.
no, yeah. I like no, I'll speak for myself, and I think I speak for Bridget as well. Neither one of us are expecting or wanting those players to go out there and not try their hardest. I think what we want is for them to go out there, try their absolute hardest, and just come up a little bit short. That's all. But not on purpose. Like, but here's the reason why I want the results to potentially, favor the opposition in these final games. Bridget mentioned it earlier. There's a very small amount of points separating what would be the 4th overall pick pre-lottery and the 9th pick pre-lottery. And I just think that the most important way to salvage what has been a treacherous season is to, at the very least, try to get the highest draft pick you can. Let me rephrase that, because that's the type of phrasing that probably confuses people. End up with the highest draft pick as possible. So again, this is nothing that the players can and can't control as far as like willingness. Like, I'm not saying that they should go out there and try to lose. I'm just saying, as a fan, like, this season's been so shitty. Personally, I would like the team in the 11th hour to maintain that 4th or 5th overall pick, because is a big there is a big difference in these draft tiers between 4, 5, and 9, 10, 11. Now, to Scott's point a couple weeks ago, obviously players that are drafted, lower than others could end up being better NHL players, and teams could go off the board. And these draft rankings and draft projections don't even go the way that people expect. But I don't want this Bruins team to have any other seasons like this. If you're there, they're already there. There's a few games left. I would be annoyed, not at the players, at the situation of being that close to a top 4 or 5 pick. Again, I'll add the carrot here, pre-lottery, because nobody can know the future for sure with that stuff. And then Buffalo does what Buffalo does, and they lose to the Bruins, and they get their 15th top 5 pick in the last 15 years. Like, I want the Bruins to get the best pick possible while they're in this situation. And again, I'm not saying that that's on the players to go out there and tank on purpose. That's not what I'm saying. But as a fan, from a results perspective, I would be more excited going into the summer if I know that the Bruins are picking potentially, 3rd to 5th overall, as opposed to, if only they didn't beat Pittsburgh and Buffalo and Chicago in the last week, and then they ended up with the 9th or 10th pick, and then these lottery teams that have been there every year get yet again another great pick. And I am not as fearful as the Bruins becoming one of those teams, because Scott has made the point in the past, and it's valid. Be careful what you wish for. But the difference is the Bruins are already here, so I just want them to get that pick that they probably deserve on paper. Like, if you look at their plus minus, their team goal differential compared to Buffalo's, Boston's is like worse by about 30 goals. So I just want the Bruins to get the pick that they
almost 40. Bruins are
Yeah.
minus 54 in the season. Buffalo's only a minus 15.
So I just want the Bruins to get the pick that they kind of deserve this year. Like, they deserve to get, based on the team analytics, they deserve a top 5 pick. I'd hate to see them not get it at the last second. And just real quickly, with that said, this is going to sound hypocritical, but from a humane perspective, I was glad to see them beat Carolina, because it was nice that they could finally snap that losing streak, not have the worst losing streak, I think, in team history, and stop fielding those questions. So from a human level, I'm glad that they got that monkey off their shoulders. But going forward, I know what the goal is long term. I hope.
Yeah.
And that's all.
Well,
Yeah, the beauty of getting a top 5 pick is that you're guaranteed one of, if you think Michael Misa is the top center, which most experts do, even though he just had a disappointing first round exit in the CHL playoffs, I think most people still think he's the second player behind Matthew Schaefer at the top of the draft. Well, the beauty of being top 5 is you're guaranteed one of those next 3 centers, whether it's James Hagens, Anton Frendel, or Caleb Desnoyers. So, now, like, if you're picking 3rd, you get your pick of those 3 guys, which is great from the perspective of, if there's one you like more than the rest, you make sure you get your guy. It's also kind of terrifying in the sense that it opens you up to picking the wrong guy, the one who, doesn't really hit, and then one of the guys behind him turns into a legit number 1 center. Like, that's, like, there's like that debate of like, oh, if you're 5th, you just get whoever's left, and that's kind of easy, right? Like, the Patriots a couple years ago when they were picking 3rd overall, it was like, all right, you're just going to get whichever quarterback is left out of Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. And it's like, so you can't really miss. Like, you just get whoever's there. In that way, like, it's almost easier if you're 5 and you just take who's left. But I also, like, of course, I think as a general manager, you'd like to have your pick of the guys, because in theory, like, with all the homework these guys do, you should have a clear ranking. We won't know what it is, but between Hagens, Frendel, Desnoyers, like, even if you throw in Porter Martone as a winger or Roger McQueen as like the next center after that, like, the Bruins should have a clear ranking where there is some difference between those guys, and they're not just like, Oh yeah, they're all the same. We'll take whoever.
But that's only great if you're picking in the top 5. And in what we're saying is if they win their next 4 games, they could be picking 9th, which means that we're not even having that conversation. And where the problem lies
Yeah,
is that
I mean that's what I was talking about. Yeah, I was talking about top
yeah.
5.
So the problem is that's great. They would need to finish either finish bottom 5 or with the lottery end up somehow there. And what happens if they win, maybe because there's winnable games in the end of the schedule, right? They're playing Chicago and they're playing Pittsburgh.
And
Chicago,
Also, New Jersey's struggling. Like New Jersey's not playing
they're
great
playing
right
New
now.
Jersey twice, and New Jersey's a playoff team right now.
and Buffalo, Bridget, Buffalo finishes the year against Philly. So like there's some of these worst teams are playing each other too, which means one will lose, one will. So it's yeah.
So yes, so you need, and I hate that these words are coming out of my mouth. You need to lose to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's only 3 points ahead in the standings, and they would be picking 9th, and you would potentially, switch with them and end up with an 8 or 9 draft pick instead of a 4 or 5 draft pick if you're beating Chicago and you're beating Pittsburgh. Or it's hard because you want them to get that good pick, but we don't know how these next 4 games are going to play out considering the teams that they're going against. It's not like they're going against a team that is just going to run away with a game, because that's just not how the last 4 games look.
Right, and obviously like they beat Carolina.
Yeah,
and
Carolina was the one I was like, oh, that's a loss.
Yeah.
They won. So,
but
because of the schedule with a back-to-back for Carolina and the guys they're missing, it makes more sense.
So like when Scott's tweeting out that the Bruins take a 1-0 lead or 2-0 lead, like I trust me, I get what Scott's saying when he's like, what do you expect these players to do, right? But you can understand fans being home, right? And I'm not talking those fans, but just fans in general that like they just want the team. You've gone this far as a bad team this year, just get the pick you probably rightly deserve. If the Bruins lost that game last night, right? Right now they have the 4th pick pre-lottery, but they were up 2-0 in that game. If they won that game last night, I think they'd be 9th, picking 9th pre-lottery. That's how thin this margin is right now between these teams. So it's just, you can understand why fans are like, oh, I love the Bruins with all my heart, and that's why I want them to lose, so they get that top pick. Because when Scott's illustrating like the idea of, it's scary when you have like one of the top picks, because then you can make a mistake and pick somebody. That's why 4 and 5 is kind of that sweet spot where it's like it kind of takes away that risk of just taking the wrong player. But when you get down to 9, 10, 11, which is kind of what Bridget was saying, it's like, okay, now you're talking about hoping that somehow the lottery bolsters you up, or that these teams just go off the board. And if they don't, and you look at who's available at like 9, 10, 11, I'm sure there'll be really strong NHL players for this Bruins team as well. But it could be down the line, and it could be a ceiling of second line or third line. Whereas these top 5 picks, and the good news is with Schaefer going 1 as a defenseman, is that the top, 4 forwards in the draft will still be available 2 through 5, which is great for the Bruins, because I think San Jose will take Schaefer, because San Jose's, they do have young forwards in their system, and Celebrini and Smith, and maybe that young stud defenseman is what they want, which I think is why he's projected to go 1. So it's just, yeah, the Bruins winning last night would have made these last couple of games really just impossible to predict where they ended up. It's still up in the air, but now they're 3 points back of Buffalo, and right now they're sitting 4th. We'll see where they end up, but it is very tight margins between these teams. It's fascinating.
We were talking about this a little yesterday on Sunday Skate. I think probably more off air than on, honestly. But let's say the Bruins do win the lottery and get the 1st overall pick. What do you do? Because Matthew Schaefer is pretty clearly considered the top prospect. Like, he's the best player available if you're picking 1st overall. He's a defenseman. What do you do? Do you take him? Do you try to trade out? Do you take Misa, even though he's not the quote-unquote best player on the board?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the Bruins right now, you have Charlie McAvoy on the right side. You have Hampus Lindholm. McAvoy's in his prime. You got Hampus Lindholm, Mason Lohrei, who obviously has a ton of work to do defensively, ironically enough, as a defenseman, but he's on the left side, brings a lot of offensive production as a young defenseman. But organizationally, unless Schaefer is the next Cale Makar or Bobby Orr, like, the Bruins, they desperately need center. They need a center. And if the Bruins got number 1 and they drafted Misa as a center iceman and he turns into an absolute bust, and not Michael Schaefer. Is it Michael Schaefer?
Matthew Schaefer.
Matthew Schaefer goes on to be one of the best defensemen in the game. Yeah, that would suck, but at least you're making that pick like with the right intentions. I know that there's an old adage not to draft for positional need, draft the best player available. And I think it's kind of the prompt that Scott's getting to here. But this forward, the Bruins desperately need young, high-end caliber, cheap forwards that they can build around. And I personally would forego Schaefer at number 1 overall, because if I'm managing the Bruins, that's not what our system needs the most right now. That would be my answer.
Yeah, and if you wanted me, it'd be hard to trade out. Like, what are you going to get to go from 1 to 2? It would have to be to a team that really needed, like the second team would really, really want Schaefer in order to trade up with you. To want, like, do you understand what I'm saying? It'd be hard to trade the pick, because then you'd probably be trading out of the top 5 if just because of just how it would end up working out with who would want him that bad. Yeah, it would be, and because if he was so over the top, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people fielding, you'd be fielding a lot of phone calls for it, but it would be hard for them to trade down from 1 if they didn't want to take him, and it'd be hard for them to not take him. So there's not like an easy happy medium there, and their need is obviously more so in their forward group and their center group. So yeah, that would be a tough situation. I don't think they're going to end up at 1. So unless somehow the lottery goes their way, but yeah, they're not gonna.
Which it is, because
chance that they end up at 1 is
as I've told you, the NHL will rig this for them. So,
well, Scott, what's your answer to that question?
I haven't decided yet. The draft isn't until the end of June, so I'm not locking myself in, but.
What's the stipulation?
I do think Schaefer's the best player in the draft, and I have a hard time passing on the guy I think is the best. I don't know. I think I might lean towards. Right now I'm leaning like 51% towards taking Schaefer, because I think he's the best player, and I think a bona fide left shot defenseman who could potentially win Norris trophies is really hard to pass up. And that's also because I don't know if I'm sold on any of these centers being like a locked and loaded number 1 center. Misa is probably the closest. I might be putting too much weight into him having a bad playoff series, which I just did over the weekend. So maybe with more separation from that, I'll fall more in love with Misa again. But like right now, I'm like, ugh, I don't know if I really want to take him number 1 overall.
Well, I also think that Hagen's it's being overblown. I think his point per game totals as a freshman, number 1 center at Boston College. I think that's nothing to sneeze at, and I think that he's going to be an absolute stud in the NHL. I think Frondell is going to be an absolute stud. Grown man strength, elite NHL release he will have as a shooter. And for me, it just comes down to like right now, who is the Bruins' number one center of the future? I don't like any of the answers that you can give me. And who is the Bruins' number one defenseman of the future? Well, you can at least tell me it's Charlie McAvoy for the next, whatever, 7 years or whatever it is, like plus. I mean, and obviously Laura has a lot of developing to do defensively, but I'm comfortable with the Bruins higher end defenseman, I think, in the short and medium term. I cannot say that about center ice. So for that reason, I just feel like it's the responsible thing to do is to make sure that you're getting a higher prospect at that position where you are stronger in other positions. It's their weakest position in the organization. And in my opinion, the purpose of the draft would be to strengthen where you're the weakest. And I understand what you're saying, Scott, but
yeah, because I would say like that's all perfectly sound logic. But if 5 years from now you took Michael Misa first overall and he's a second line center who's putting up 65, 70 points a year, that's pretty good. And if you're watching Schaefer win a Norris Trophy, people like this front office will still get ripped. Like that'll be seen as a miss.
Well, if people had the ability to project 5 years down the line completely accurately, then a lot of people will be doing different things throughout their lives, and certainly when it comes to NHL drafting, I think.
And for the record, I'll also say, like, I don't think Schaefer's a lock to do that either. I've said this before. Like, I don't think this is a draft that has that generational Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon at the top of it. I just don't think any of these guys are that. So I guess with Schaefer, like the question is he Rasmus Dahlin or even better than that? Or is he Owen Power?
Right.
Owen Power went first overall, and he's a perfectly solid top four defenseman, but he's not a franchise changer.
He was the next Victor Hedman, according to a lot of scouts, right? And so, yeah, all you can really do, and you have to put trust in your scouting staff and everything, but you have to make the best decision you can based off of the information you have at that time. And I just think that for the Bruins, you have to replenish the center ice position in your organization. Now, if you hypothetically draft Schaefer in that situation, and you're getting Eichel next year in free agency, okay. I mean, there's so many things, but that to me is just an absolute pipe dream. I think the one thing you can do is try to make your best decision in the here and now. And I think I personally would be surprised if any one of Misa, Hagens, Frondell didn't pan out to be at least very good number one centers in the league at one point, if not a high-end number two. And that the organization needs that anyway. But it's a good question, Scott. I understand them take the best player option as well. But for the Bruins, their center ice position is so desperate right now. I just think that they're one of the rare teams in draft positioning where you have to go for need. Most teams aren't in that dire of a situation at one position. I think the Bruins are. Just like the Patriots needed Drake May. They needed to get that quarterback. There was no other option. They needed to get best guy available. I think we went over, Scott. I think you said an 11:30. I don't want anybody to be late for meetings today.
No, I'm good. I don't have anything today.
He skipped the meeting. It's fine.
No, my usual Monday morning meeting got moved to Monday afternoons. So
cool. So we got another 5 hours here. What else do we want to talk about?
Yeah, what are we getting for lunch?
Yeah. Bridget, do you have any follow-ups on that or anything else you want us to go over?
No, but I'm sure that as we go through and as we watch the position change, we'll have an evolving opinion on it, as well as the more research that we do into these guys and try to talk to maybe some of the people that know them better than we would, that our opinions will switch around during the off season. And my last thought is just 4 games left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gotta find a way to lose those. And then you might be able to take your pick more so than you would if you're stuck with 8 or 9. So.
Yeah, I mean, if they lose at least 3 of them, they should be good. I mean, they can probably afford another one in there. But Chris Peters, that's our guy, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
We'll have to get him on for
Absolutely.
some draft talk this year more than ever. I think we had him on one year. The Bruins didn't have a first or second round pick. That's one other note I wanted to mention.
We had him on for Lysell.
I did mention this last night online, but hopefully it's a reminder to others. It was a reminder to me when I saw it. Wherever the Bruins finish this year in the draft positioning, it is not going to help them in the second round. They traded their original second round pick in 2025 back in the Garnet Hathaway trade. So while the Bruins did acquire 2 second round picks at this year's trade deadline for this year, they are picks that weren't originally Boston's. So if you're somebody who's out there saying that the Bruins first round, wherever the Bruins finish in the draft, also helps them in the second round as well when it comes back around, you'll have to wait till the third round and beyond for that to pick back up for Boston, unless things change and there's more trades. But as of right now, that's a reminder to fans. The Bruins do not own their own second round pick this year. They do own 2, but not their own. Little detail. Okay, Bridget, Scott, if you guys are all set, I am good. Thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your work week, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.